Alright, so the Super Flyer 2 recap. Of course, headlined by Srisaket Sarungvasai, successfully defending his WBC Super Flyweight Championship by majority decision against Juan Francisco Estrada, and what was a really good fight, a great fight, man. Tit for tat. Estrada started off doing really well. Was doing well to kind of stick and move. Pivoting around Srisaket and forcing him to kind of reset himself. Srisaket did respond, however. Went both to the body as well as to the head. Switched up his look multiple times throughout the fight, but especially early on, just the fact that he was kind of varying up exactly which trajectory his punches were coming from, but very much constantly to the body. But also, even to the head, there was a lot of times where he was throwing a 2-1, where he'd throw a left cross, then a right hand behind it. Whether it was a left cross, that kind of right jab, like power jab, like really stepping into it, or like a right, like semi-hook. But, there wasn't really enough space to actually throw a full, like, looping hook, and he would catch Estrada with it. I do think that he had Estrada a little bit hesitant in the middle rounds, especially. Where Estrada was, he would fight, he would throw a couple of good shots, and he would actually land some really good, clean shots. But it was just a matter of Srisaket, even when he wasn't necessarily landing especially clean, he was landing in such a way where he would move and or jolt Estrada's entire body. So it's like even if he would land like on the shoulder, on the hip, or on the side of the body, or kind of graze him with a shot, he was still moving. He was just physically moving Estrada. And in light of the lack of Estrada's overall work rate, from a more general sense, and even though he would land some really good, solid, kind of sharp shots, accurate shots, a lot of times what would wind up winning out would be Srisaket's just kind of thudding power shots. Just you could really see the force that Srisaket was putting on a lot of that stuff. Whereas with Estrada, a lot of times he would land really good shots, but Srisaket would take it and he would just eat it, and keep coming forward, keep pressing forward. Funny enough, really it wasn't until later in the fight where it seemed like Srisaket was starting to get a bit arm weary. From a lot of the shots that he was missing, because Estrada did do a good job of, defensively making Srisaket miss quite a few shots, and made him pay a little bit here and there, and maybe some of the damage that Estrada was able to do with his counter punches helped to tire Srisaket out late. As especially in the 12th round, probably most notably in the 12th round, where Estrada was really just teeing off on Srisaket and looking to basically try and almost score like what would have been a come from behind knockout. Over him. Personally, I actually had Estrada winning the fight. I did have him 7-5, but I honestly have no problem with a draw or with Srisaket winning the fight close as well. To me, it was really an either way type of fight in the end. Just a good scrap between the two. And ultimately, Srisaket's overall, just the force of everything that he was putting forth, with his punches, with his pressure and everything, it kind of I think made Estrada played it a little bit tight to the chest, too much so, so much so that Estrada wasn't getting his offense off enough or consistently enough in order to basically win the rounds emphatically enough to actually get the scoring from the judges. Although the one judge that had it 117-111, I think, was way out of bounds. The fact that he scored the 8th and the 9th round to Srisaket, I think, shows that, as well as the fact, generally from the fact that he had it that wide. To me, round 8 and round 9 were two pretty definitive Estrada rounds. Srisaket fought back in one of the two, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, reasonably well, but he lost the round. It was a really good fight, though, all the way up until the end. The two of them, giving hell to each other, and honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch between the two of them. All things considered. Now Inoue may potentially be leaving the division. He hasn't entirely officially vacated everything yet, so who knows? Maybe he'll be able to stick around at some point. That's the fight that most people are really clamoring for, Srisaket versus Naoya Inoue. I'd love to see it still, regardless of whatever happens next with him. If he decides to vacate, maybe he'll do a one-off at 118. Maybe Srisaket or move up and join him at 118. There is the possibility that Srisaket may have gotten tired in the later rounds against Estrada because of the fact that it was troublesome for him to make weight. He's a very big super flyweight, and you definitely know that he's got to be not just the hungry fighter in the in the why am I blanking on the damn word? In the non-literal sense, but a hungry fighter in the literal sense because he's trying to make the damn weight. In the proverbial sense, I guess you might say. But it was a really good fight, good performance for Srisaket, and honestly, I mean, the man really, he has a good argument for being, if not the number one guy pound for pound, at the very least top 3 or top 5. He definitely belongs in the rankings, easily. Just the last 3 wins alone, the racking them up in that fashion and the way that he's done it is really impressive stuff. And it's one of those things that, in light of kind of the inequities of a lot of other weight classes and what other fighters aren't fighting these other fighters in their own weight class, and or the best guys of their division, and sometimes it's out of a given fighter's control, in a certain sense. But at the same time, ultimately you when you're holding all the guys to the same standard, the guy that's ultimately actually racking up the wins against the top tier opponents really deserves the edge in that case. And so Srisaket, I think, has as good an argument as any, if not better than anybody's else. But going on to the undercard, McWilliams Arroyo pulled off a pretty good upset over Carlos Cuadras. I think, matter of fact, Arroyo was actually the biggest underdog in the entire card, if I remember correctly. But Cuadras, he basically caught Cuadras early. The first round, I think just the fact that he was able to light Cuadras up hurt him really badly. I think kind of threw Cuadras completely out of his game plan. Because really, Cuadras should have fought this fight in much the same way that he fought Srisaket a couple of years ago, where he was sticking and moving, where he was kind of sticking the joint out, so to speak, winning this time and looking good next time. But I think when Arroyo caught him with that big shot, and then Cuadras was able to respond and then hurt Arroyo back, I think Cuadras got a little bit too happy in like a hooking war. He started hooking with a hooker, as some people might say, and that's a dangerous game to be playing against Arroyo. I mean, Arroyo, for sure, is one of the big true bombers of the lower weight classes. He's right up there with a Srisaket, with an Inoue, as a guy that, I mean, he has legit one punch power. He has lit up and knocked out guys with 1 or 2 shots in the past before. I mean, he really lit up. I'm not wrong back when he was challenging him for his IBF flyweight title at the time. And I mean, frankly, I've beat that dead horse back to life and dead again. But I mean, he truthfully deserved the victory in that fight. But I mean, just period point blank, the guy can crack. Unfortunately for Cuadras, he didn't stick to his game plan that he should have stuck to, and he started getting into a bit of a heated kind of hooking war with Arroyo, who was just he just had more power, and just the fact that Cuadras is so kind of loosey goosey with his defense led him to being able to be hit pretty cleanly by a bit more of a technically sound textbook boxer in Arroyo. So it's a big win for Arroyo. Failing a potential matchup with Inoue or a rematch with Estrada, I think Arroyo winds up looming as another good name value and a good money fight opponent for Srisaket. And hey, Arroyo, he kind of managed to win his way into contention for a much better money fight than he's had in more recently. So good win for Arroyo. Got himself back into the ranks. Cuadras, man, he needs to get it together, man. But I mean, he's another guy that's just one win away from getting back right up in the top ranks of things. And speaking of top rank, you got Joran Akaz out there. I mean, I think Arroyo is very live against Joran Akaz, if not Cal Yafai, but God knows what Yafai is doing. Because I mean, honestly, I'd still favor Cuadras over him. I'd favor Arroyo over him. I'd favor pretty much like half the fighters on this card over him. But moving on to the next fight, Dani Nietes started off the HBO portion of the broadcast against Juan Carlos Revico. Scored a brutal, just nasty 7th round knockout over him after what was a pretty dominant boxing display from Nietes, and one that I didn't necessarily expect. I actually thought that Revico was going to give him more trouble than he did, considering the fact that they fought a similar opponent in Komar Nantapech in both of their last fights. And Revico actually handled Nantapech, I thought, easier than Nietes did. And I thought that he would be able to give Nietes a bit of difficulty with the kind of stick and move display that he's given in the past, and that he actually gave to Kazuto Ioka. Took Ioka 2 fights in order to actually stop Revico, whereas Nietes managed to do it in 1. So really, really good win for Nietes. Helps to just kind of underline, I guess, what's been a long-standing, long-running relatively dominant career for Nietes. And I say relatively dominant because there has been a couple of close fights that he's had in the past, but outside of like your Chocolatitos and your Estradas, I mean, Nietes has been pretty much the kind of like one of those true torchbearers of the lower weight classes. You know, the guy that won a title at 105 or 108 and 112 now. They're possibly talking about him going up to 115. I wouldn't advise that. Ultimately, I do think that Nietes is kind of pushing himself at 112 as it is. I think he's at that stage, kind of where Gonzalez was, where he's kind of peaking out at this weight class, and especially at his age right now at 35. You know, who knows? I mean, really, some of his best years may be behind him in terms of his early 30s at 108. I think really may have potentially been his prime. But he definitely looked really good against Revico, much better than he did against Nantapich. I was kind of questioning the decision to move up to 112 in how he looked against Nantapich. But really solid win for him. I do know that Daigo Higa was ringside. There was a possibility of him fighting Nietes next. I wouldn't necessarily like that for Nietes' sake. I think Higa's that next guy. I honestly think that he's kind of the next dude at flyweight, the next guy to kind of take over and be like the true like star of the division. I guess like the Errol Spence of the flyweight division, as like the way that a lot of people see Spence at welterweight, as it were. That's the way that I see Higa. I think he's kind of primed to take over at the moment. You know, just the viciousness and the knockout power and you know, the activity and everything. He is kind of the total package. The one thing that he kind of lacks is the experience and maybe somewhat the defensive skills, which he's still kind of developing. But which isn't to say that Nietes wouldn't have a chance against him. I actually think that Nietes would probably have one of the best chances against Higa. Higa actually, interestingly enough, has a fight coming up against Christopher Rosales. Most probably well known for being Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez's cousin, but otherwise being a really, really solid fighter, a guy that arguably got robbed against Andrew Selby in a recent fight, and gave Kal Yafai himself, the aforementioned Kal Yafai, a very difficult fight a few years back. So that's a really good fight, actually. It'll be further proof, I think, ultimately of exactly where Higa stands in terms of his skill set, his ability, and so on and so forth. But once again, it was a great win for Nietes over Revico. You know, I'm looking forward to see what happens with him next. I actually wouldn't mind him seeing him against the winner of the next fight I'm about to talk about, which was Brian Valoria versus Artem Dalakian, which was for the vacant WBA Flyweight Championship that was, of course, recently vacated. I covered that pretty extensively. Vacated by Kazuto Yoka, another three-weight champion, 105, 108, 112-pound champion. Wound up vacating this WBA belt because he's having some promotional, professional issues with his family running his promotional company and management and all that stuff. Valoria was here against Artem Dalakian, the two top-ranked guys for the WBA, facing off against each other. And what was I mean, it was an okay fight. It didn't quite live up to the you know, I think the level of the other three in terms of excitement or necessarily skill level. Dalakian did pretty good to kind of use his height and his reach advantage against Valoria, where he was kind of forcing Valoria to kind of chase him to try to reach in a little bit. Valoria is not really a highly active guy. He's a bit more of kind of a counter-punching power puncher, so he kind of needs you to lead, and then, you know, he's trying to just nail you with one of those big, you know, bomb-type shots. And especially against Dalakian, considering the fact that he was working really heavily. And then when they would get on the inside, when Valoria would kind of have his opportunities to potentially hit Dalakian, Dalakian would kind of tie him up, and or he would kind of bully him, you know, almost like pull his head down. He actually wound up getting a point deducted in, I think it was the 9th round, for pulling Valoria's head down. Ultimately, I did score it for Dalakian, 9-3, or actually it was... Actually, no, I had it 8 rounds to 3 with 1 round even because the point got taken away in a round that ultimately I thought that Dalakian would have otherwise deserved to win. But Dalakian is the new WBA champion. Did relatively well against Valoria. I'm not entirely sure how well his style will translate against the likes of Higa, against the likes of Nietes. Ultimately, I actually think Andrew Selby would actually be smart to try and go after Dalakian. I think that'll be kind of a fight, more of like a technical fight where I think it'll be close enough, and especially if they have it in the UK, where I think Selby would wind up getting the nod, which isn't to say that he wouldn't necessarily deserve it. I think it'd be a good close fight, but I mean, that's just kind of my quick recap of the Super Fight card. I might make another video going through it a little bit more extensively, but that's going to do it for this one, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.